A 22-year-old woman sits alone in a Norfolk bar, nursing a bourbon while strangers mock the tattoo on her wrist. To them, it looks like a costume. To her, it carries the names of 5 dead teammates and the last mission they never came home from. Then a 2-star Admiral walks in, salutes her in front of everyone, and turns one humiliating moment into the start of a truth so explosive it could break the chain of command wide open.
The jackass laughed, a sound that filled the whole dive bar. That a moto tat on your wrist, darlin'? Your man get that for you? She never turned, just set her glass down, slow, like someone who already knows the final score. She was 22, built small enough to be overlooked, quiet enough to be forgotten. Folks always forgot, until they couldn't. If this story resonates, drop your town in the comments and hit subscribe. Let's see how far this goes. Chesty's Place in Jacksonville had that grit only a marine town bleeds. Scuffed stools, beer-soaked air, and the quiet rumble of jarheads back from places they'd never name. A late October Thursday, the joint packed so tight, no one clocked the woman at the bar's far end. Avery Cole was 22. Dark hair fell past her shoulders over a plain white top. She wore faded Marpat trousers tucked into boots that had chewed up more than just gravel. Her small frame was a trick of the light. It made men dismiss her on sight. She'd quit correcting them years ago. It was a better weapon than most. This was her second bourbon. She'd lost count. 8 months back, she was a Raider, Team 2, Marine Special Operations Command. The youngest woman to ever run Black Ops missions for the regiment. 8 months ago, she had a fire team, a mission, and a brother-in-arms, Danny Ryan, who called her kid and meant it. 8 months ago, Reveille had a purpose. Now, there was just a bar stool and the unique fatigue of having no war left to fight. The ink on her wrist flashed in the dim light. A Marine Raider skull, clean and sharp. Below it, in tight script, a story cut short. MSOT 8222. She got it 4 months after the ceremony, the folded flags, the tight-lipped condolences from brass who couldn't say what happened on a mission that never existed. She needed the tattoo to scream the names her voice couldn't form. Tonight wasn't about finding a fight or anything at all. It was about escaping her apartment where the quiet felt heavier than a full pack, and she was done humping it solo. The 4 guys at the center table had been loud from the door. Pog contractors built like bricklayers, the type who needed their presence felt. The loudmouth in the red hat and flag-patched vest had been sizing Avery up since her second round. She'd seen it, ignored it. The equation shifted when he shoved his stool back and swaggered over. Hey! He planted himself on the bar beside her, an invasion of space. Been looking at that ink. What is it? One of those stick-on jobs? Avery didn't flinch, just took a sip. Hey, I'm talking to you. I heard you, she said, her voice flat. So, what gives? Some kind of moto thing? You a squid or what? He smirked at his buddies, who watched with that dumb energy of a pack egging on its alpha. It's real, she said, her back still to him. Oh, yeah, right. 'Cause that right there, that's a Raider pin. You know what that is? He crowded her, his breath stale with cheap beer. I'm asking 'cause the jarheads who earn that go through hell. Through selection, they get broken down till only the hardest sons of bitches are left standing. So when I see some girl wearing it like jewelry, yeah, it gets under my skin. You get me? The bar's hum was fading. Not all at once, just conversations tapering off. It was the instinctual radar of veterans sensing a storm gathering on the horizon. I know what it means, Avery said. Do you? 'Cause a buddy of mine washed out of BRC, tough as nails, that guy, came back broken. So yeah, I take that pin seriously. Seeing someone like you rocking it for show. He paused, hunting for the right insult. Disrespectful. Avery placed her glass down and finally swiveled on her stool to face him. Her eyes swept over him, a quick, cold assessment. The threat evaluation was done before her face showed a thing. I passed assessment and selection at 19, she stated. I ran the course with a fractured fibula. I never reported, 'cause they'd have dropped me. And I wasn't dropping. I earned my pin and ran 6 Black Ops missions before most grunts see their first pump. She raised her wrist. This ink is for my team. The 5 men I went down range with 8 months ago. The ones who stayed there. So when you talk about disrespect, I need you to think real hard about who you're aiming it at. The man just stared. A flash of doubt crossed his face, quickly buried by the ego of a man who couldn't bear to be wrong in front of a crowd. Okay, he said, drawing the word out. Even if that's true, a girl your size making it through Raider selection, he just shook his head. I'm just saying, it's a real tall tale. I know you do, Avery said. So prove it. I don't prove jack to civilians in bars. Right, because you can't. He started back to his table, his voice loud for his friends. Stolen valor, that's all it is. Girls getting tats because they think it looks badass. His buddies snickered. She took a slow breath. She'd faced down armed hostiles with less of this bone-deep weariness, the exhaustion of not being invisible, but of being seen as a lie, seen as a picture instead of a scar. The barkeep, a woman in her 50s with a salt and pepper buzz cut and eyes that missed nothing, drifted toward Avery's end of the counter. Rita had run this bar for 16 years. She could smell trouble before it was poured. You want me to? Rita began. Not yet, Avery murmured. Rita gave a curt nod, staying put. The guy in the red hat was coming back, the showmanship gone, replaced by raw anger, which was worse. Look, I ain't trying to start nothing big here. I just think if you're gonna wear something Marines died for, you better be able to back it up. That's it. You want me to throw down to prove I can have a drink? Avery said. I want you to admit you're a poser. Not gonna happen. Why not? Because I don't owe you a damn thing. His jaw locked up. You know what? Forget it. Have a nice drink. The contempt was thick, a man choosing dismissal over defeat. He turned away. Then the door swung open. The air in the room shifted, a pressure change you feel before you hear, the kind of authority that owns a room just by entering it. 3 men entered, and every head in the bar turned on instinct. The man in the center was 63, with iron gray hair high and tight. He wore dress blues pressed so sharp they looked lethal. 2 stars gleamed on his collar. He moved with the quiet certainty of a man who'd spent 40 years being the final authority in every room he entered. The bar was his, not by pride, but by pure, undeniable fact. General Marcus Thorne, Deputy Commandant for the Corps. His 2 shadows wore civvies that couldn't hide the steel beneath. Warriors know their own. Half the jarheads in the place were standing before Thorne made it to the bar. He bypassed everyone, his path direct, unerring, to the far end where Avery Cole sat with her whiskey, her ink, and the 8 months of crushing silence. He stopped, snapped to attention, and rendered a sharp, formal salute. Sergeant Cole, he said. His voice had the quiet authority that carries across a battlefield or a gravesite, the kind that makes men freeze and listen. It is an honor. The bar fell dead silent. Avery shut her eyes for 2 seconds flat. When they opened, her hand was already rising, the salute crisp, a movement living in her bones, far deeper than thought. General, she said. Thorne dropped his salute, his gaze cutting into the man in the red cap. A 4-second stare holding 40 years of judgment. That tattoo, Thorne said, is for the only operator left from Echo 7 assault team. She passed basic underwater demolition at 20 years old. She ran 6 Tier 1 direct action missions. 8 months ago, she was the last one standing when her team was wiped out on a classified op in Yemen. He paused, letting the silence press down. She didn't get that trident because it looked good. It's there for the 5 souls she went to hell with and couldn't bring back. The man's face turned the color of wet cement. Thorne held his stare for 3 more seconds, then dismissed him from existence. He looked at Avery, his expression shifting, becoming private and urgent. I didn't come here for a drink, he said softly. I came for you. He placed a manila envelope on the counter. This is about Echo 7, about what went down in Yemen, and you need to hear it now. Avery looked at the envelope, her hand still. Her training kicked in, recognizing a point of no return. Picking it up was the last choice she'd make as the person she'd been for 8 months. She knew she would pick it up anyway. The man in the red cap and his crew were grabbing their coats. No one watched them go. Rita, the bartender, was polishing glasses at the far end of the bar, giving their conversation the space it demanded. Avery put her hand on the envelope. It was thick, government-issue paper. The classification marks up top were familiar from 100 mission briefs. "You said what really happened," she stated, her voice steady. The official report cited compromised intel from an enemy source, a local Yemeni asset. "I know what the report said. You helped write it." Thorne didn't flinch. "Yes." Avery lifted the envelope. It felt heavier than paper, weighted by everything that had been left unsaid for too long. "Then you better explain why you're handing this to me in some Norfolk dive bar instead of using the proper channels to amend a classified file," she said. Thorne's face was a mask, but his eyes told a different story. A man who'd run out of road. "Because every channel I tried over the last 4 months slammed shut," he said. "And because the asset who sold out your team wasn't some Yemeni informant, he met her gaze. He's American. A former DIA officer who is now a very protected man." Avery went perfectly still. Outside, Norfolk carried on with its Thursday night, oblivious to the fault line that had just split open inside a woman holding a bourbon she no longer tasted, the names on her wrist a promise she was about to keep. Dana Reyes died covering her 6. She had shielded Avery from the kill zone just long enough for the bird to get her out. She did it instantly, instinctively, the way she did everything. All in. For 8 months, Avery believed Dana died because of bad intel. A casualty of war, of the brutal math of combat, where nothing is ever certain. She was about to learn Dana died for a defense contract. She opened the envelope. The papers inside look like standard government forms, until you read them. Then they look like a kill sheet. Avery read as Thorne watched. He'd ordered a coffee he wouldn't drink, his hands flat on the table, watching her face like a commander bracing his soldier for impact. The first page was a signal intercept log from a coded channel, dated 14 days before Echo 7 deployed. The metadata traced it to a private firm, Meridian Defense Solutions in McLean, Virginia. The contents were a complete mission profile. Her mission profile insertion points, comms frequencies, target grids, team roster, every detail her team thought was locked down tight, transmitted to a buyer 2 weeks before they put boots on the ground in Yemen. Avery's hands were rock steady. A lifetime of training made them so, but something inside her chest was fracturing, something she had no protocol for. "Who is Meridian Defense Solutions?" she said. Less a question, more like she was tasting a new name for the first time, testing its weight. Thorne pointed to the next page. A photo. A man in his late 50s, silver hair, wearing a smile polished by decades of fundraisers. He was shaking a senator's hand outside the Russell Senate office building. "Harlan Voss," Thorne said. Ex-Defense Intelligence Agency, senior level. Retired in 2018 and built Meridian using his old network. In 2022, Meridian was bidding on a classified surveillance contract, $900 million over 5 years. Avery looked at the photo, at that smile. "What does a surveillance contract have to do with my team?" "Contracts that big need proof of capability," Thorne said, his voice flat. "Not just proposals. They need demonstrated, real-time intelligence dominance in an active war zone." The voice of a man sticking to facts because anything else was an insult. Voss got Echo 7's mission package from a compromised officer at the Joint Task Force. He sold it to a rival intel buyer who fed it straight to the network your team was hunting. That network set the ambush. Then, the rival buyer used proof of that intercept to show their own capabilities to another client. 3 deals. Your team's lives were the product. Avery put the photo down. She pressed her fingers into the table's edge and took one slow breath. "Dana died," she said, her voice dangerously quiet, so Harlan Voss could land a government contract. Thorne met her eyes. "Yes." The silence stretched for 4 seconds. "You said every official channel was closed to you," she stated. "How many did you try?" 8 attempts in 4 months. The Inspector General, FBI Counter Intel, 2 senators on the Armed Services Committee, the NSC, and 3 internal Navy channels way above my pay grade. Each inquiry either went dead or I got word back to stand down. Thorne's hands tightened on his mug. 2 of the men I briefed were reassigned within 3 weeks. Another took early retirement. The message is clear. Voss is covered. He's spent 20 years collecting leverage on people who can't afford for him to talk. He has 4 sitting senators on intel committees in his pocket. He's got insurance policies on officials all over the Pentagon. If Voss gets investigated, the blast radius takes out careers and, for some, their freedom. It's an investigation that can never happen. Avery pulled another page. Financials, shell companies, fund transfers routed through 3 countries. The endpoints were clear enough. $47 million paid to Meridian Defense Solutions over 18 months. And one account number in a format she knew was active DIA. This account, she said, it's still live, yes. Someone on the inside is still getting paid. That's why we can't go through channels, Thorne said. We don't know who's compromised. Any report I file could be flagged. He leaned in. The proof we need is on Voss's private server at his estate near Charlottesville. It's on an air-gapped system in his office. Payment logs, comms, the original mission file with metadata showing who pulled it and when. That evidence, dropped on every major news network at once, creates a firestorm they can't bury. Avery looked at him, her gaze unwavering. You want me to sanction a black bag operation? I'm pointing to where the intel is. What you do with it is on you. A political way of saying go. A shadow crossed Thorne's face. Less guilt, more the look of a man who'd already squared the gap between official orders and what had to be done. I can provide ISR support, gear from a deniable channel, 2 operators I trust with my life. But the infill, the execution, that's all you. He locked eyes with her. You're the last of Echo 7 standing. That evidence has your name on it. Avery leaned back, her gaze fixed on the photo of Harlan Voss on the table. That smile, the senator, the flag on his lapel, the perfect confidence of a man who never figured the Piper would come to collect. Walk me through the security schematics, she said. Sleep was a luxury she couldn't afford. Back home, she pulled out the box from under her bed, sealed since the week after the service, and sat with a strip of photo booth pictures. It was her and Dana, 4 weeks pre-deployment, goofing off at the base exchange, feeding quarters into the booth on a whim. Dana's arm was slung over Avery's shoulders, both of them cracking up at nothing. That punch-drunk exhaustion of professionals who finally get 10 minutes to just be idiots. Dana had taped the photo strip inside her locker. Said she needed a reminder of what the hell they were fighting for. When Avery had questioned it, Dana said, deadpan, because you look like a damn fool in this, and it keeps my ego in check. Avery clutched the photos to her chest, holding them there. Dana Reyes took a dirt nap so Harlan Voss could demo new hardware for a contract. She had thrown her body in front of Avery in the kill box. For that, for money, for leverage, for a line item on a spreadsheet. Avery placed the photos back, rose, and flipped open her laptop on the table. She burned the midnight oil, started with land records for Albemarle County, Virginia. She dug through historical survey maps, then architectural permits at the county assessor's office. The estate Voss had near Charlottesville was built on land with a groundwater runoff system installed in 1961, decades before the current security grid. She located the original drainage survey, buried in a digital county file that hadn't been opened in ages. By 0400, she'd found the hole in his armor. A drainage culvert that ran from a pond on the north side of the property, passing right under the east wing of the main house. It wasn't on any of Voss's contractor blueprints, not part of any electronic perimeter scan. 40 years old. A ghost in the system for anyone who hadn't dug deep enough. She rang Thorne at 0430. He answered on the second ring. I've got our rabbit hole, she said. I need 2 things. The names of your operators and Voss's itinerary for the next 2 weeks. The 2 men Thorne sent were easy reads. Jace Morrow, 31, former DevGru, carried himself like a man still stuck downrange. One who'd given up on coming all the way home. He shook her hand, gave her a quick once-over, and said, Thorne said you found a ghost tunnel from 61. I'm in. Petra Nolan, 28, ex-Army Intel. She was compact, precise, and read cyber defenses like most people read street signs. It was obvious, instinctive, effortless. She glanced at the drainage survey Avery had printed out. Then she looked at Avery. "This is solid work. Who taught you to dig like this?" Avery replied, "No one. I just kept digging." Petra nodded. The only right answer. For 48 hours, they owned Thorne's kitchen table, wargaming the op. Guard rotations, camera blind spots, a specific 12-minute window during the 0200 shift change when the East Wing was soft. Voss had a Thursday dinner in D.C., confirmed on his public calendar. That meant a skeleton crew at the estate, 2 bodyguards with him, 2 left behind. Go time was Friday, 01:30. Avery was checking satellite grids at midnight Thursday when her burner phone buzzed, a blocked number. She waited a beat, then answered, "Miss Cole." The voice was like molasses, unhurried, with a southern drawl men learned to use as a weapon. "You've been kicking over rocks that belong to some friends of mine. I thought I'd reach out myself and suggest you reconsider." Avery's posture went rigid. "Who is this?" "Just a friend. One who knows you're at Arlington every Sunday. Eisenhower Gate. Same parking spot, same route, about 40 minutes, like clockwork." A beat of silence. "We know your AO, Miss Cole. We know your patterns. We know who you've been meeting." His tone went soft, a whole lot scarier than a shout. "Your team died for their country. That's a legacy. Don't muddy the waters chasing ghosts." Avery's grip on the phone was steady. "Is that a threat? I'm giving you the chance to stand down before it's no longer a choice. Your buddy Dana Reyes died a hero. You can honor her without burning yourself to the ground." Another calculated pause. Think about what she would have wanted. The line clicked dead. Avery stood in the charged silence of the kitchen for 10 seconds. She turned to the table where Jace and Petra were working. "We're moving," she said. "Tonight. They're on to us. They don't know the specifics, and we can't give them time to get spun up." She looked at them both. "You good to go?" Jace snapped his folder shut. "Born ready." Petra glanced up from the security map. "The camera loop needs 2 more hours to set." "You've got 2 hours," Avery said. "Make 'em count." She turned to the window, a sentinel, while the others prepped behind her. Out there, a man with a southern drawl was running his own op analysis, weighing the force needed to make her stop. He'd used Dana's name like a trigger, a pressure point. That was his mistake. He told her they were watching, which meant they had a signature that could be tracked. He told her they knew her routines, which meant every routine was now compromised and subject to change. He told her to stand down, which meant she was directly over the target. Harlan Voss was in Washington. His estate had half its guard detail, and the tunnel was there, mapped and waiting, a 40-year-old question about to be answered. Avery turned from the window. 2 hours, she stated. Then we move. The culvert was right where the 61 survey marked it. Avery slid into the darkness at 0132, her NVGs painting the world in ghostly green. The concrete walls were tight, 4 feet across in places, narrower in others. The kind of squeeze that finds out if you're really claustrophobic or just faking it. She was fine. She'd trained in worse. She pressed on. Jace's voice crackled in her ear, a mere whisper. Overwatch is set. Got eyes on the north tree line. You're clean on thermal from my position. She keyed her mic twice. 2 clicks. Moving out. Petra's voice came a second later. Camera loop is solid. You've got 12 mics from my mark before the risk factor spikes. I'll give you the signal when you hit the foundation. Avery controlled her breathing in the nose, out the mouth. The same cadence from every single covert infil she'd ever run. The culvert floor was slick, with groundwater seeping through ancient cracks. Her boots churned through it without a sound. Cold was just data. Press on. 400 yards in, she met the first problem. A ceiling section had collapsed years ago, leaving a jumble of broken concrete blocking the path. She scanned it for 3 seconds, saw the gap, and started to climb. The debris shifted. A fist-sized rock broke free, hitting the water with a crack that echoed like a rifle shot in a church. She froze. Listened. Only the drip of water and the hammer of her own heart. Press on. She cleared the rockfall, dropping into ankle-deep water on the other side. She checked her internal clock. 2 mics burned, 10 left on the clock once Petra called it. The passage widened as she neared the foundation, the main drainage shaft, where the ceiling finally opened up, letting her stand straight. She quickened her pace. A faint sliver of artificial light bled through the grate above, telling her she was under the house's east wing. "Mark," Petra's voice came. 12 mics! Go!" Avery was already in motion. The grate lifted with silent, steady pressure. She rolled out into a wine cellar, came to her feet, drew her suppressed Glock 19, and moved to the door in one fluid motion. Water pooled from her gear onto the concrete. She pushed forward without a glance back. The hatch opened to a utility hall. She hooked a left and took the stairs, climbing. 1 deck, 2 decks. Her soft-soled boots made no sound on the carpet. She counted off the east wing doors. 1, 2, 3. The objective. 40 seconds to defeat the lock. The scent of old wood and wealth hit her, the specific smell of a man who never had to answer for his actions. She was already moving, ignoring it, heading for the isolated server terminal. Petra's ghost drive would pull the partition data in 60 seconds. 50, 40, 30. The room flooded with light. I was expecting company. Avery pivoted, pistol up, Weaver stance, sights aligned, finger on the trigger. Harlon Voss was in a leather chair by the door, his suit immaculate. He'd either missed his D, C, dinner, come back early, or was never going. He was silver-haired and calm, his hands open and empty. He matched the dossier photo, but his eyes were sharper, more alive than any lens could capture. His gaze fell on the Glock aimed at his sternum, but he remained still. "Gunnery Sergeant Cole," he said, his voice the same one from the comms link 2 nights prior. Polished, with a southern drawl, the sole survivor. I did wonder which vector the blowback would come from. He canted his head. Using a 1961 drainage plan was inspired, I'll admit. My own security detail never dug that deep. "You sold my team's op order," Avery stated, her voice iron flat. 14 days before we stepped off. Yes, no denial, no theatrics of remorse, just the clean admission of a fact he'd already accepted. I did. Behind her, the quiet whir of the drive pulling files continued. 20 seconds left. Her pistol stayed on him, her eyes on his hands. 5 of my Marines are dead, she said. Yes. The look he gave her wasn't guilt or pride. It was the detached assessment of a man reviewing a choice he still deemed necessary. Your unit's operational intel was exceptionally detailed, actionable to a degree the market rarely sees. In this business, proof of access is the only real currency. It secured a $900 million contract over 5 years. He let that hang in the air. The calculus was sound. The drive clicked, finished. Avery snatched it, her fist closing around the metal without breaking her stare. "The calculus," she echoed. "I know how that sounds." Corporal Reyes was 26 years old. Her tone was unwavering. She had a sister in Sacramento, called her every Sunday. She was learning Portuguese, wanted to see Brazil after her 10 years were up. She died covering my 6 because she took a round and refused to stop moving. Avery's grip was rock solid. "So give me the drive and leave." Every alarm in the building shrieked at once. Not a warning, but a declaration. I told them I was through. He rose from the chair. A man who knew staying put was no longer viable. "They've been waiting for an excuse. You just handed them one. They'll burn this place to the ground with us in it, call it a B and E gone bad." "Your exfil route," Avery demanded. 3rd deck, north side. Roof access rigged with a zip line to the tree line, 200 yards. I built it knowing the people I deal with are capable of exactly this. He was already heading for the hall. "Move." They took the service stairs, hearing multiple bogies below them, moving fast with zero noise discipline. They had the building and they knew it. Avery peeled off at the 2nd deck landing, putting 3 suppressed rounds down the stairwell. A body crumpled. 2 others ducked back, spraying return fire. The wall beside her head exploded, drywall dust stinging her cheek. She was already moving. 3rd deck. Voss slammed his shoulder into a bookshelf that swung inward, revealing a ladder. They climbed into the cold night air. Below, the estate was a hornet's nest. The main gate was on fire. Jace's rifle cracked from the wood line, laying down controlled pairs to cover them, but they were outnumbered. Avery saw muzzle flashes from at least 3 enemy positions. She ran the grim numbers in her head. The zip line stretched from a roof anchor to a massive pine. A steep, commercial-grade line. 200 yards of nothing. The roof door blew open behind them. 3 shooters spilled out. From his jacket, Voss produced a 1911 pistol Avery hadn't seen. He racked the slide with the easy motion of a man who'd carried one for a lifetime. "Go," he ordered. "You're coming with me. You're my witness. I'm 72 years old, and I sold out 5 American Marines for a contract." He looked at her, his voice stripped of all artifice. "I've lived without honor for a very long time. Let me have one thing that isn't." He brought the 1911 up and fired twice. One man down, the others scrambled for cover. "Go now." Avery clipped her harness to the line and launched herself into the void. The zip line howled under her mass. 200 yards of dark air, the ground a blur below. The burning gate flickered to her left. The tree rushed up to meet her. She hit the pine, tucked and rolled, and came up moving. The drive in her vest was a hard knot against her chest. Dana's name was a fire in her soul. From the roof behind her, Voss's pistol barked 3 more times. A pause, then a single, heavy blast lit the sky orange. She ran for Jace's position and didn't look back. Petra, RV, at Checkpoint Alpha, East Service Road, she spoke into her comms. Voice steady, her hands were steady. Her heart was a hammering drum, but she kept that intel to herself. "On the move," Petra replied. She broke through the tree line to find Jace behind a log, his rifle working. 2 tangos were down in front of him, but more were flanking from the east. "Contact report," she snapped. 4 confirmed KIAs. At least 8 more bogeys inbound. Then we displace. She grabbed his arm. "Now, Jace. We move now." They moved through the woods the way Marines do in the dark, from cover to cover, never making a silhouette, pausing only long enough to chart the next bound. Avery dropped 2 more hostiles who materialized on her left flank. Double tap, no hesitation. Pure muscle memory from a part of her brain that didn't ask the rest for permission. The van slid into view on the service road, lights out, engine humming, Petra's hand giving the signal. They piled in, the doors slammed, and the van lurched forward. Avery sat in the back, the evidence drive a cold pressure on her sternum. The orange glow of the burning estate faded in the rear window. A silence fell, the kind that follows a firefight when you're not yet sure you made it out whole. "We got it," Jay said, breaking it. Avery stared at the drive. Payoffs, comm logs, the original op order for Echo 7 with metadata proving Voss downloaded it and sold it. Everything the families of 5 dead Marines deserved to see the light of day. "Yeah," she said, her fingers tightening around it. "We got it." A memory of Dana's voice, sharp as today. "That picture of you is awful, Gunny. It keeps you humble." Avery clutched the drive and refused to cry. There would be a time for that. This wasn't it. "Drive," she said, "and do not stop." The van ate up the dark Virginia miles. For 40 minutes, no one said another word. Jace was in the passenger seat, rifle across his lap, his gaze fixed, still running threat scenarios in his head. It was a switch he hadn't turned off. Avery sat in the back, the drive in her fist, Voss's last words echoing in her mind. "I've lived without honor for a very long time. Let me have one thing that isn't." She didn't know what to make of it. She went in hunting a monster and found one. But she'd also found something else buried beneath it. A man at the end of his rope who, in his final moments, chose to pay a debt that cost him everything. She wouldn't call it redemption. She doubted the word even applied to a man who made the choices Voss did. But she held the thought in the same hand as the drive, letting them both exist unresolved. "He didn't have to do that," Jay said from the front, more a statement of fact than a question. The kind of observation that never makes it into the AAR. "Negative," Avery clipped. "It changes nothing." Her eyes burned into the data stick. Dana's still gone. Jace gave a grim, silent nod. By 0330, they were holed up in a grimy motel off the interstate near Fredericksburg. A cash-only joint that ran on a policy of deliberate ignorance. Avery sat on the lumpy mattress, her laptop humming as the drive spun. For 20 minutes, she dug through the files, a knot in her gut slowly uncoiling as she verified the contents. The money trail was there. 18 months of wire transfers laundered through shell companies and ghost accounts. 37 encrypted comms logs between Voss and Client 7, including the one sent 14 days before the mission went sideways. And there it was, the mission data package, tucked in a partition, just as Thorne promised. The metadata was a smoking gun, a timestamp, a device ID tied directly to Voss, and a transfer log pointing to a server in the Caymans. Petra ran the address. 40 seconds later, she had a link to a holding company tied to 2 senior intelligence officials still active in the government. This was the whole damn thing, and then some. Avery's fingers were steady on the keyboard, but a trip hammer was going off in her chest. She opened 4 encrypted upload portals simultaneously. The Washington Post, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and a wire service with a national security guy she knew from the teams, a guy who played with classified intel but never burned his sources. She bundled the entire package for each target. Payment logs, comms, the mission file with its damning metadata, the shell company paper trail, and the active government account numbers. The cover message was identical for all 4. No name. The data stick itself was her signature. They'd be smart enough to read the electronic trail. At the bottom, she typed one final sentence. 5 families are owed the truth. Burn it all down. Her finger hovered over the send key for 3 seconds. Then she pressed it. She dialed Thorne. He answered on the first ring, the dead silence on his end telling her he hadn't slept a wink. "It's done," she said, her voice rough. "The package is sent. They'll have it within the hour." A beat of silence. The drive. "You got it all?" "Everything you said, plus interest. There are active federal slush fund numbers in there, Marcus. People are still on the payroll." She used his first name, a clear signal this was personal, not professional. "When this breaks, it's going to be a firestorm. The second those headlines hit, powerful people in D.C. are going to start making calls. You need to go to ground, somewhere they can't make you disappear before this gets too big to kill." Another, longer pause. "Voss. He's handled," she stated flatly. No details needed. Thorne processed it. He made his choice. Right. A profound weariness settled into his voice, the sound of a man who'd carried a crushing burden for so long that feeling it shift was a victory in itself. "I'll reach out to some contacts I trust. A few reporters will need a primary source to go on the record." Avery glanced at the ink on her wrist. Echo 7, 2022. "I'll do it," she said. "That's congressional hearings, Avery. Your face on every screen. Every scumbag still walking free will know exactly who hunted them down." "I'm aware," she said. "You'll be a high-value target. I've been a target before." Her gaze fell on the drive. Dana never got to leave Yemen. The least I can do is see this through. The news exploded at 06:15 the next morning. Avery was still in the motel room as Petra flipped on the TV, and every channel was leading with the story. The leak was everywhere at once. 4 major news outlets got the same package, and none of them were willing to get scooped. The financial data, the comms, the mission files by 700 hours. The intel had thrown 3 separate federal agencies into full-blown panic mode. By 900 hours, 2 Meridian defense execs were cuffed by feds at Dulles, just short of boarding a flight to Zurich. The FBI's counter-intel division, silent for 4 months, officially opened their case before noon. At 11:30, Senator Clement Hargrave, the top name on Voss's list, announced his immediate retirement, a move every reporter in town recognized as a man fleeing a subpoena. At 1400, the DoD released a sterile, 1-paragraph statement confirming a formal review of Echo 7's operational records. The bureaucratic non-speak said nothing, but for the first time in 8 months, it was the truth. Avery watched it all unfold on the flickering motel TV, flanked by Jace and Petra. She said nothing. No words felt right. She was watching 5 ghosts get their honor back in real time. The feeling wasn't relief, not the sharp satisfaction of mission accomplished. It was something quieter, heavier, the feeling of a locked door finally swinging open, a door that should never have been shut, bolted by men who decided the truth wasn't worth the price. Ray Morrow had been planning a trip to Italy with his mom. Lena Vasquez left behind a 3-year-old daughter who would grow up with only pictures. Jisoo Park had a law school acceptance letter waiting for him. Hank Callahan was just 2 months shy of finishing his contract. And Dana, her little sister, who made stupid faces in the Senate gallery and kept a photo booth strip taped to her locker, a reminder of what they fought for. Avery flattened her palm against the cheap bedspread and focused on her breathing. "You good?" Jace asked. "No," she admitted, "but I will be." The congressional hearing was fast-tracked for 3 weeks out, a speed that signaled the immense political pressure now bearing down from all sides. Thorne forwarded the official summons, a request for her testimony. She read it twice, put it down, and went for a 6-mile run at 0500. She needed the simple, punishing burn in her muscles, something that didn't require her to feel anything but exhausted. She testified on a Tuesday in November. She wore a plain gray suit, hair pulled back tight. The tattoo on her wrist was visible, a deliberate choice. The hearing room was a circus. The press gallery was jammed. In the public seats were the families, faces she knew only from briefing photos, widows, brothers. One woman in her 60s sat with her hands clasped, her eyes locked on Avery's. It was the look of a mother who had waited far too long for answers. Avery used no notes. She never needed them for the truth. She walked them through what really happened in Yemen. Not the cover story, but the brutal reality she'd pieced together from the drive and her own searing memory. She detailed how the ambush was perfectly laid, how the kill zone was a textbook execution, not some lucky shot. It was the work of an enemy who knew their exact route and timeline. She spoke of Dana providing cover for her exfil, describing the sound without flinching. The families deserved to hear it from someone who was there, not from some redacted government report. She laid out the whole conspiracy. Harlan Voss, Meridian Defense, the $900 million contract, and the cold calculus that turned her unit's lives into a bargaining chip. She read every name from the logs. She recited every account number. She stared down senators who couldn't hold her gaze. For 4 hours, she didn't shed a tear. When the gavel fell, the room erupted. Through the chaos, a woman pushed her way forward. She was in her late 30s, with an exhaustion etched on her face that spoke of years, not days. Petty Officer Cole. The woman stopped close, her hands trembling. "I'm Keely Morrow, Ray's sister." Avery froze, the world narrowing to that one face. "I was in the gallery. I heard everything." Keely's voice was firm, but Avery saw the immense effort behind it, an effort she knew intimately. "For 8 months, my anger was directed at him. That sounds awful, I know, but he chose that mission. He left us, so I was mad, because I thought he died in a gunfight. He was the only one I could blame." Her knuckles whitened. "But now I know he was set up, that he did nothing wrong. Someone sold him out, led him right into a trap." She paused, taking a breath. "And that knowledge changes the whole damn thing. It won't bring him back, but the truth matters." Avery watched her, the prepared speeches she'd rehearsed for families vanishing from her mind. All that remained was honesty, the one thing she'd ever truly banked on. "Rai never dogged a single rotation," she said softly. "Not one time in 6 months of workups. He kept the squad level when things got tight. He just knew when a guy needed a laugh and could deliver it without making a show of it." She hesitated. "He told me about his Italy plans, about taking your mom." He spoke of it as a done deal, just a question of timing. For a brief second, Keely's composure shattered completely before she pulled it back together. She covered her mouth, breathing hard. When her hand dropped, her eyes were wet but resolute. "Thank you," she said, "for not letting them bury that truth with him." Gratitude mixed with fresh grief was something Avery never knew how to handle. She simply held it, like she'd held everything else for 8 months, carefully, with both hands, praying it wouldn't break. "He was meant to go to Italy," Avery affirmed. "Yeah," Keely whispered. "He was." They stood in the chaos, 2 women who had carried Ray Morrow's memory apart, now finally carrying it together. The fallout from the hearing was spreading. Senator Hargrave's sudden retirement came too late. 3 subpoenas found him by the end of the week. A pair of Pentagon officials were suspended, pending an official inquiry. 4 executives from Meridian were in federal handcuffs. The FBI's counterintelligence probe grew by the day as money trails uncovered more names than DC wanted to admit. Then, on a Thursday, 3 weeks post-hearing, the Department of Defense issued a revised operational summary for Echo 7 Assault Team Mission 2022. Cause of loss was reclassified. All 5 operators were put in for posthumous Silver Stars. Chief Petty Officer Dana Marie Reyes was specifically named for actions far exceeding her duty in covering a teammate's retreat under heavy enemy fire. The notification came to Avery by email. She read it, then let it sit for a good while. She reached for her phone to call the person she most wanted to, but couldn't, so she dialed Thorne. "It's over," she said when he picked up. "Not over," Thorne corrected. "But it's right. It's finally right." Avery glanced at the ink on her wrist. Echo 7 2022. She'd considered altering it, adding more. She decided against it. The words that were there were the only ones that counted. "Dana got her Silver Star," she told him. Thorne's reply wasn't the Admiral's. It was the voice of a man in his 60s who'd seen too many good people pay too high a cost and had just seen one of those debts honored. "Yes," he said quietly, "she did." Avery shut her eyes and took a slow breath. She remembered Dana's voice from a photo booth, laughing at a dumb joke. "You're a total goon, and I'm keeping this forever." Their forever had been much shorter than they'd banked on. But the official record was now true, and no one could ever change it. 3 months later, Avery Cole entered the Anchor and Rope on a Thursday night. She took the same seat she'd been in when her world fell apart. Same stool, same spot at the bar, same bourbon, neat. Rita, the bartender, put the drink down without a word. She'd been expected. News in this world always traveled fast and quiet. The bar had changed in one key way. The wall behind the counter was longer now. Rita had done it on her own authority, the kind of move that explained why she'd run this bar for 16 years. 5 new, framed portraits were on the wall. Official military headshots, dress uniforms, the government-issue flag background, Specialist Ray Morrow, Petty Officers Hank Callahan, Jisoo Park, and Lena Vasquez. And Chief Petty Officer Dana Marie Reyes, staring forward with the unshakable calm of a woman who knew her purpose. Beneath the 5 pictures was a 6th frame, holding a quote in simple, clean type. "True warriors don't seek glory, they just need to know they did the right thing." Avery read it from her stool. She hadn't written it and didn't know who did. It didn't matter. It was true. It was there. That was enough. She was halfway through her second bourbon when the man in the red ball cap walked in. She knew him instantly. The square jaw, the contractor vest, the same confident posture that had seemed so arrogant 3 months ago. Now it just looked like a man moving the only way he knew how. He paused at the door, surveying the room. When his eyes landed on her, his entire demeanor shifted. His shoulders sagged. His jaw loosened. It was the look of a man whose mental rehearsal was over. He walked to the bar, stopping 2 stools down, holding his cap in his hands. "Lieutenant Morrison," he began, then quickly corrected himself. "Petty Officer Cole, my mistake. I saw the testimony. I was confused on the rank." "Either is fine," Avery said. "Have a seat." He sat, ordered a beer for something to do with his hands, and faced her with the heavy discomfort of real remorse. "I watched all 4 hours," he said. "The entire thing. Twice." He stared at the bar. "What I said that night about your ink, I was ignorant and loud, a bad mix, and I apologize. This isn't me fishing for you to say it's okay. It's me telling you what I did was wrong, and I know it." Avery studied him. She'd had 3 months to think about the man in the red cap. She'd concluded this: he was wrong on the facts, but right on the principle. The trident stood for something. He just didn't realize who he was talking to. That was ignorance, plain and simple. Ignorance could be fixed. "What's your name?" she asked. "Derek Cozy. Army. 2 tours, 4th Infantry. Got out 4 years ago." He fiddled with his beer. "I'm in construction now. Do some security work on the side. Not the same." "No," Avery said. "It's not. Lost a buddy over there. Second deployment. IED on a road we'd driven 30 times. The official line was insurgent activity. Wrong place, wrong time. He paused. After watching you, I started wondering if that was really the full story. Avery paused. She knew exactly what this was. It's what people do when one story breaks open a truth they'd kept locked away. She'd been there. She was still there. File a request, she said. Send it certified mail to the Inspector General and keep a copy for yourself. After the hearing, people at that level are actually opening files instead of shutting them. It might be a dead end, but you deserve to know for sure. Derek met her eyes. You think they'd really investigate? The window's open right now, she said. In a way, it wasn't before. I'd use it before somebody slams it shut. He gave a slow nod and raised his beer. To the ones who don't come home. Avery raised her glass. And to the ones who find out why. They drank. She bought the next one. They talked for an hour, the way vets do when the posturing stops, about the cost, the gains, and the ghosts that stick around. Derek Causey was a decent man under all the swagger, which was true for a lot of guys if you had the patience. As he left, he shook her hand. For what it's worth, he said, what you did, going in there, getting the proof, and putting your name and face to it on the record, knowing the blowback, he just shook his head. That took guts. I don't think I have. You never know what you've got till the moment of truth, Avery replied. That's the only straight dope anyone can give you. He nodded, then left. The bar returned to its usual Thursday drone. Rita worked her way down the bar, topping off drinks as the low hum of old salts and their stories filled the space. Avery nursed her drink, eyes fixed on the wall of heroes. Gunny Reyes' photo was dead center of the five, placed not by date, but by Rita's gut instinct that put Dana right where she belonged, in the middle of her Marines, watching over them all. Gunnery Sergeant Dana Marie Reyes, Silver Star, Kia, Yemen, 2022. A changed report couldn't change the truth. Dana was gone. So was Ray Morrow. All five were gone, and no amount of justice could fix that final head count. Avery knew that in her head from the start. Her heart, which learned slower, was still catching up. What had changed was this. 5 families now knew the real story. Kayla Morrow knew her brother didn't die from some rookie mistake. He hadn't died because of bad luck or a reckless streak. He died because a suit decided his life was worth less than a government contract. That knowledge wasn't a comfort, but it was solid ground. And you could build on solid ground. Avery's phone vibrated. A text from Petra. Hill just expanded the investigation into DIA contractors, going back to 2015. They got 3 more names from our data pool. This ain't over. She read it again, then placed the phone screen down. Colonel Thorne had called her that morning, saying something that had been rattling in her brain since. The work you did kicked open a door a lot of powerful people paid to keep bolted shut. Now, the question is, do you want to help us keep it propped open? She'd asked him what he meant. They're creating a new billet at MARSOC, oversight and accountability, reports straight to the top. It needs someone who's seen the system from both sides, who gets what operators need and the real price of protecting the institution. He'd paused. It needs a Marine who can't be rattled, who's already proven they'll speak truth to power no matter the cost. Someone who understands the real mission isn't always in the briefing. Avery had told him she'd give it some thought. It's all she'd been thinking about. She glanced at the ink on her left wrist. Echo 7 2022. She'd gotten it 8 months ago, needing something on her skin to carry their names when she couldn't speak them. She wore it into a bar, some clown called it a sticker, a general saluted her for it, and her entire life pivoted in one night. The Raider insignia wasn't just a decoration or a memorial. It wasn't even just for grief, though it carried all of that. It was a statement of who she was. An operator. Someone who moves toward the fire. Who owns the night instead of waiting for dawn. Who sees the mission through, no matter the cost. Gunny Reyes had seen that in Avery before Avery saw it in herself. She'd called her little sister, meaning you're exactly what this Corps demands. She'd put her own body between Avery and the kill zone, meaning you finish this, the mission ain't done. The mission wasn't done. It had just changed. It was quieter now, fought in hearing rooms and on paper trails instead of the back alleys of the world. It demanded a different kind of steel, the kind that holds steady under interrogation, not the kind that moves fast under fire. Avery had always found that harder, but the objective was the same: find the truth. Protect those who can't protect themselves from the very system meant to have their six. Stand in the gap between the powerful and those they'd sacrifice. Her dad wanted her to be a doctor. She'd shown up at Paris Island at 19, called him that first night from the barracks. He was silent for 10 long seconds, then said, "Well, you were always going to do exactly what you were going to do." And beneath the frustration, she'd heard the pride, loud and clear. She dialed Thorne. He picked up on the second ring. "I'll take the job," she said. A beat of silence. "You sure?" "I'm sure that 5 families almost never got the truth, because the system built to protect their kids was protecting the snakes who sold them out." She looked at Dana's picture on the wall. "I'm sure that's not a problem I can walk away from just because I put out one fire." "It won't be a cakewalk," Thorne said. "The brass you burned aren't going to forget who lit the match. You'll be a target in a very public job." "I know the score," Avery said. "I said it then, I'll say it now." Another pause, and she could almost hear the man's relief through the phone. He'd gotten the answer he was hoping for. "Monday morning," he said. "My office, 0800. I'll be there." She hung up, set the phone down, and drained her bourbon. She held the empty glass, feeling its solid, ordinary weight in her hand in a bar near Lejeune on a Thursday night. Rita appeared with a fresh one, unasked. "On the house," Rita said. "You've got the look of someone who just made a choice." "I did," Avery said. "A good one or a hard one?" "Both," Avery replied. "Usually the same thing, if you're doing it right." Rita cracked a smile at that, the kind of smile a woman gets after 16 years of listening to Marines unload, knowing more about the cost of service than half the generals at the Pentagon. She moved off, leaving Avery with her wall. Avery gave Dana one last look, then Ray, then all 5 of them in their dress blues, flags behind them, their whole lives still in their eyes. The swagger, the belief, the utter lack of knowing what was coming for them. Echo 7 never quits. Avery touched the ink on her wrist, pressing a finger to the Raider skull, just to feel that it was real, solid, still there. Then she raised her glass and faced the room. This silent warrior wasn't done. She was just reloading. Gunnery Sergeant Dana Marie Reyes, Silver Star, Kia, Yemen, 2022. A changed report couldn't change the truth. Dana was gone. So was Ray Morrow. All 5 were gone, and no amount of justice could fix that final head count. Avery knew that in her head from the start. Her heart, which learned slower, was still catching up. What had changed was this. 5 families now knew the real story. Kayla Morrow knew her brother didn't die from some rookie mistake. He hadn't died because of bad luck or a reckless streak. He died because a suit decided his life was worth less than a government contract. That knowledge wasn't a comfort, but it was solid ground. And you could build on solid ground. Avery's phone vibrated, a text from Petra. Hill just expanded the investigation into DIA contractors, going back to 2015. "They got 3 more names from our data pool. This ain't over." She read it again, then placed the phone screen down. Colonel Thorne had called her that morning, saying something that had been rattling in her brain since. "The work you did kicked open a door a lot of powerful people paid to keep bolted shut. Now, the question is, do you want to help us keep it propped open?" She'd asked him what he meant. "They're creating a new billet at MARSOC, oversight and accountability, reports straight to the top. It needs someone who's seen the system from both sides, who gets what operators need and the real price of protecting the institution." He'd paused. "It needs a Marine who can't be rattled, who's already proven they'll speak truth to power no matter the cost. Someone who understands the real mission isn't always in the briefing." Avery had told him she'd give it some thought. It's all she'd been thinking about. She glanced at the ink on her left wrist. Echo 7 2022. She'd gotten it 8 months ago, needing something on her skin to carry their names when she couldn't speak them. She wore it into a bar, some clown called it a sticker, a general saluted her for it, and her entire life pivoted in one night. The Raider insignia wasn't just a decoration or a memorial. It wasn't even just for grief, though it carried all of that. It was a statement of who she was. An operator. Someone who moves toward the fire. Who owns the night instead of waiting for dawn. Who sees the mission through, no matter the cost. Gunny Reyes had seen that in Avery before Avery saw it in herself. She'd called her little sister, meaning you're exactly what this Corps demands. She'd put her own body between Avery and the kill zone, meaning you finish this, the mission ain't done. The mission wasn't done, it had just changed. It was quieter now, fought in hearing rooms and on paper trails instead of the back alleys of the world. It demanded a different kind of steel, the kind that holds steady under interrogation, not the kind that moves fast under fire. Avery had always found that harder, but the objective was the same. Find the truth. Protect those who can't protect themselves from the very system meant to have their six. Stand in the gap between the powerful and those they'd sacrifice. Her dad wanted her to be a doctor. She'd shown up at Paris Island at 19, called him that first night from the barracks. He was silent for 10 long seconds, then said, "Well, you were always going to do exactly what you were going to do." And beneath the frustration, she'd heard the pride, loud and clear. She dialed Thorne. He picked up on the second ring. "I'll take the job," she said. A beat of silence. "You sure?" "I'm sure that 5 families almost never got the truth, because the system built to protect their kids was protecting the snakes who sold them out." She looked at Dana's picture on the wall. "I'm sure that's not a problem I can walk away from just because I put out one fire." "It won't be a cakewalk," Thorne said. "The brass you burned aren't going to forget who lit the match. You'll be a target in a very public job." "I know the score," Avery said. "I said it then, I'll say it now." Another pause, and she could almost hear the man's relief through the phone. He'd gotten the answer he was hoping for. "Monday morning," he said. "My office, 0800. I'll be there." She hung up, set the phone down, and drained her bourbon. She held the empty glass, feeling its solid, ordinary weight in her hand in a bar near Lejeune on a Thursday night. Rita appeared with a fresh one, unasked. "On the house," Rita said. "You've got the look of someone who just made a choice." "I did," Avery said. "A good one or a hard one?" "Both," Avery replied. "Usually the same thing, if you're doing it right." Rita cracked a smile at that, the kind of smile a woman gets after 16 years of listening to Marines unload, knowing more about the cost of service than half the generals at the Pentagon. She moved off, leaving Avery with her wall. Avery gave Dana one last look, then Ray, then all 5 of them in their dress blues, flags behind them, their whole lives still in their eyes. The swagger, the belief, the utter lack of knowing what was coming for them. Echo 7 never quits. Avery touched the ink on her wrist, pressing a finger to the Raider skull, just to feel that it was real, solid, still there. Then she raised her glass and faced the room. This silent warrior wasn't done. She was just reloading.